Yo, it's me, Captain Gold, and you're watching yet another gold standard Project Zomboid tier list. And for this particular episode, I'll be making a tier list for vanilla towns in Build 41. Before we begin, allow me to provide you with a simple disclaimer. This list is ultimately my subjective opinion, so I don't believe that I can be perfectly objective with such a subject. Regardless of that fact, I will be trying my damned best to be objective with my placements on this list. That being said, let's begin this video by covering the Exclusion Zone, or the town you really shouldn't bother visiting. The town in question being the good old town of Dixie. You see, you get 2 gas stations, a clothing store, a rundown restaurant with arcade machines, and I believe it's all the arcade machines available in the game, or all the models of them. You get a trailer that has a ton of orange soda, you get a small food market, and nothing but worthless mobile homes. I mean, there's also that drug dealer's house and Ben's cabin off in the woods, but let's be real, Dixie is a waste of time. I mean, at best, you'll set up a safe house at the gas station near the Spiffos and clothing store. Just talking about this town is a waste of time, right? So let's go ahead and move on to the bronze tier. Now, starting off bronze tier is going to be the city, or I should say town, of West Point. Okay, yes, you can spawn here. Yes, there's a gun store here, and there are some good areas to loot, especially that big-ass American Tire store. But generally speaking, West Point has way too many zombies for the amount of loot available, meaning that this town has shit ROI, or a shit return on investment ratio. And that's why I generally hate this town. Shit, there isn't even that many good locations for viable bases in West Point. Just fuck West Point in general, right? Now, after West Point, I've actually got March Ridge, believe it or not. It's also a densely populated town, don't get me wrong. There's actually a VHS store here and a community center filled with a metric fuck ton of books and magazines that'll help you in the long run. The military apartments also usually have decent loot, and sometimes they have a lot of weapons in them, depending on how lucky you are with your spawn. Plus, it's actually an interesting location in the sense that not many people come here, so in my eyes, that grants it some brownie points. That being said, though, both March Ridge and West Point kind of suck ass. I generally don't visit either of them. But if I were to visit one, I would probably visit March Ridge first before I visit West Point. And I would go further into March Ridge than I would with West Point, because with West Point, I'm probably only going to end up visiting the gun store, which is on the outskirts of town, which is next to a bar, so I might stop there. And I'm definitely going to be stopping at the American Tire store, which is way outside on the outskirts. And that tire store makes for a good little forward operating base or safe house that allows you to get to Louisville more efficiently when you're dealing with the logistics of traveling long distances. So yeah, that's all that's going to be in bronze tier, though. In silver tier, I've got Valley Station. Now, it's near Louisville, so that's a plus right on its own. And it has the single largest mall in game. Well, I don't know. I believe the mall here is bigger than the one in Louisville. I honestly don't remember. Someone fact-check me on that. But regardless of that, Valley Station also has the shooting range and the hunting lodge, both of which contain plenty of guns and ammunition, which is fucking nice. But aside from that, there's not much else that I can notably mention about Valley Station. I mean, there are some decent areas that make for good bases, but generally speaking, the big, nice part of Valley Station is the mall, the shooting range, the hunting lodge, the fact that it's close to Louisville. Anyways, let's move on to the next town in silver tier, which is gonna be the town of Vallis Lake. Now, this quaint little town has pretty much everything that you would ever need, right? Just a little bit of everything, except for a VHS store. It has a farming goods store, which has everything you need to use for farming, right? But inside that farming store is a nice gun store, which is stacked with firearms and ammunition. It has a bookstore, a police station, a hardware store, a grocery store with a clothing section, and even a bar. The gas station here also makes for an excellent base. I usually use it as a safe house or a forward operating base. It's also right next to Doe Valley, and in Doe Valley is where you would find the Army surplus store. I'm trying to think, what else does this place have? That's probably about it, to be honest. Uh, it's also right next to Riverside too. In fact, this is the closest town to Riverside. So if you're playing at Riverside, you're probably going to be visiting Phallus Lake at some point. That being said, there is one downside to Phallus Lake, and that is that it has an unusually high Zed population for its size. It's a small town with the population of something like Riverside or Rosewood, which is remarkable to me. But I think now would be a good time to go to the gold tier. Now, starting off gold tier for me is going to be Riverside. Riverside has just about everything. It has a police station, a VHS store, a hardware store, a bookstore. It has the school library, has a post office with plenty of books and magazines, has a fishing shop, an auto shop, warehouses, a used store, a bar, supermarket. There's plenty of nice homes. There's the country club to the south, 2 gas stations. There's that ghost town nearby, and the zombie population here is also on the low end. Now, the only real problem with Riverside is that it's way too far away from all the other towns. And as I've previously mentioned, Phallus Lake is the only decent town near it. Also, things are very spread out in Riverside. So the need for a car arises a lot more in Riverside than it would in some of the other towns in game. But coming right after Riverside on gold tier, it's going to be Rosewood. Now, Rosewood doesn't have a VHS store, doesn't have a fishing store, doesn't have a used store or a warehouse or a hardware store, but it does have the glorious fire station. It has the prison. In my opinion, it has better base locations. It has an actual clinic, and it's a much easier to memorize town that's a little bit more compact, so you don't actually need a car to make it in Rosewood. Having a car is definitely a plus, but you're not going to absolutely need to get your hands on one on day one. Rosewood is also inherently, to me, more beginner-friendly than Riverside. On top of that, it's much closer to towns like Phallus Lake, March Ridge, and Muldraugh, and it's also the closest town to the secret military base. And like Riverside, the Zeke population is pretty low, but it's a bit more packed densely than Riverside. That being said, Rosewood to me is a little better than Riverside. And it's certainly the town that I would recommend any beginner begin at. Now, topping off gold tier, it's going to be what I consider to be the most popular town in Zomboid, and that's Muldraugh. Now, Muldraugh has literally everything you could ever need, with the exception of a prison and fire station. But Muldraugh has everything that both Rosewood and Riverside has, and often it has more of that nice shit. Take, for example, warehouses. Riverside has some warehouses. Muldraugh has more. Riverside has a nice used store. Muldraugh has a hell of a lot more used stores. It even has a better clinic than Rosewood, right? It just has more of what makes Rosewood and Riverside pretty decent. There isn't a fishing shop in Muldraugh that I can remember, but there are also more unique little areas in Muldraugh, like the electronics store, for example, that grants Muldraugh a little bit more utility. But the cool thing about Muldraugh is you don't really have to move out of Muldraugh, and it's very rare that you'll have to go out of Muldraugh for good loot. The only time I ever left Muldraugh when I played there was to go get guns from other towns and from Louisville. That's about the only time I ever left. So yeah, it deserves the top spot in the gold tier, in my opinion. It's definitely superior to Rosewood and Riverside, but it does have a little bit more zombies than Rosewood and Riverside, and I would say it has a medium-sized population of Zeds, which makes sense. Like, the population in Muldraugh seems appropriate for the landmass that Muldraugh occupies in Knox County. Now, on top of all of those benefits, Muldraugh is also centrally located. It's next to Rosewood, West Point, Doe Valley, Phallus Lake, and March Ridge. So it's already better than Rosewood and Riverside in that regard. So if you ever do find yourself needing to go further out for more resources, it's a lot easier to do that when you live in Muldraugh. So, yeah, in my opinion, Muldraugh is easily gold tier. And again, yeah, sure, there's more zombies than Rosewood and Riverside, but it's honestly worth it. I mean, you know, once you've played once as a beginner, let's say you played at Rosewood once and you got a couple hours under your belt, go ahead and start at Muldraugh. You'll absolutely love it there. All right. I guess we can top off this video with a very obvious conclusion. Platinum is going to be where Louisville goes. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this because I think it's rather a self-evident conclusion to make. Louisville literally has everything you'd ever need. Literally everything. Even with the large Z population in that metropolis, the ROI for Louisville is deep in the green. There are literally areas in this massive city that aren't even that populated by the undead, and some of those areas have a ton of good shit. Like, I really don't know what else to tell you. It's literally the best town, or I should say city, the only city, in the game. It's not the best location for beginners, but once you get decent at Zomboid, this city will be worth a visit. Hell, it will be worth staying here, because once you live in Louisville, you actually don't ever have to fucking move out. Like, literally ever. Like, think of Rosewood. One of the defining features of Rosewood is the fact that it has a prison. There's a jail/prison in Louisville. One of the other selling points for Rosewood is that it's near the secret military base. There's a military checkpoint and outpost at Louisville that has better loot, and that's easier to access. The police station in Louisville has more guns than Riverside, Rosewood, and Muldraugh combined. That's just the truth. There's a bunch of unique little areas in Louisville as well. Like, there's 2 malls in Louisville. There's a smaller one, and then there's the big one near the right corner of the map. Now, I'm trying to think here. What are some unique areas that Rosewood and Riverside has? Because that makes it a defining feature. Because if you name it, I guarantee you'll find something like that in Louisville. Like, think about Doe Valley's Army Surplus store. There's an even bigger one in Louisville. Like, I'm not joking when I say everything you would ever literally need exists in Louisville. Literally everything. You'll never have to move out of Louisville. I mean, again, fire stations. I believe there are 4 or 5 fire stations in game. Aside from Rosewood, the rest of them are located in Louisville. I mean, you can't compete with Louisville. It's the top of the list. It's in a tier of its own. So yeah. Anyways, with all that said, that concludes this gold standard tier list. If you enjoy this sort of content, support your captain by liking, sharing, and most of all, subscribing. And don't forget to smash that notification icon as well, so that you may be notified when I publish a new video. Also remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined, down in the comments section. I'm Captain Gold, and I hope to see you in my next video.